Good evening. All right, all right, all right. Welcome to We Rise. First, housekeeping note. Please, everyone, make their way to the center where there are some free seats there, as people will be coming in and we'll leave the outside aisles open for those who will be coming in and joining us later. My name is Gina Belafonte. I'm so honored to be here tonight, and thank you all so much for coming to We Rise. Woo! We Rise is the launch of a larger campaign, Why We Rise, centering on our youth and mental health and well-being. Our children deserve early and easy access to intervention and care. A mental health issue is not a sign of weakness, it's a condition. And everyone has the right to be well and to find resources and ways in which to do that. So welcome here tonight. We have a very exciting evening for you. Tonight we are going to be centering our conversation around a critical justice, the impact of mass incarceration on our families. This conversation takes a deep dive into the connection between poverty, violence, and oppression as a driving force for community trauma and mental illness. The powerful panel that you'll see tonight explores the mental and emotional toll the prison system takes on incarcerated individuals and their loved ones that are often left behind. Our speakers provide real-world advice, real-world participation in the issues of criminal justice, and diverting individuals in mental crisis and with safe language and emergency alternatives. So we have a full program tonight. We have a short film we're going to show. We have some folks that are going to speak. So let's start the evening with a film from a great organization called Brave New Films. Thank you.
I had a lot of abuse in my life. My mom used to abuse me very badly. She was very verbally abusive. She was physically abusive. When she would ask me to do something, I would automatically do it wrong because I was afraid. So then I would get beat. My father was in prison all my life. He was a drug addict. I hated my dad because he loved heroin more than me. My mom and dad were very involved in gangs. There was always gang meetings at my house, you know, gang members. That's what I knew. That was my destiny. That's what I was gonna be. That was my role. No one ever showed me nothing different. And so I followed it. I was hurting. You're gonna hurt me? Oh, I'm gonna fucking hurt you. I had one GTA, petty theft, burglary, identity theft. I would break into the house and I would steal their dope. And I would go to the park right by their house and I would sell their dope right under their nose. I've been in prison 4 times. I had got out of prison. One day, my roommate says, hey, let's go to Homeboy Industries. And I was like, where's that? What's that? And she's like, I'm going to show you. I opened the door. I looked inside. There was one guy. He starts walking towards me, and he just goes, how can I help you? And everything that I was carrying, all my fears, everything just fell off. And I bursted into tears. You know, I'm a substance abuse counselor here. I've been here like 6.5 years. Therapy has been a big game changer for me, you know. Being able to learn coping skills and learning how to self-talk, you know. Learning how to change my perception. And I would have never done that if it wasn't for therapy. I would have still been suffering. Locking people up isn't the answer, it creates more. The cycles last longer. Give me some love. Show me I can. Tell me I'm good. And I will be successful.
And let's do just that. We would like to acknowledge Emily Chapa, who's with us tonight. Let's show her some love. Beautiful. And let's show some more love for an incredible, incredible artist. And aside from his artistry, Jasiri X is a recipient of the Artist and Activist Rauschenberg Award and the founder of the anti-violence group One Hood. Please welcome to the stage, Jasiri X.
What's up, y'all? When I say people, you say power. People. 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 All right, I'm ready to go. Let's throw that song on. Let's go. Let's go. Y'all all right? It's packed in here. Y'all look good, too. Yeah. So I'm Jasiri X. I'm a hip-hop artist, originally from the south side of Chicago, based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I want to do a little performance for y'all tonight, but first, I want to hear a few words from Ta-Nehisi Coates. Welcome to the whitest house. Slave souls haunt the halls when the light is out. They suck the blood of the poor and don't wipe their mouth. The last gas of a world that is dying out. Welcome to the whitest house, where every room is a tomb that they lie about. Where you can put your filthy feet on the finest couch, and for the right amount, you could even buy it out. White power, white pride, white privilege. Whites maintain all their rights when whites pillage. White lies, white tears, and white feelings. White supremacy in the White House. The whitest building, ironically, in the place they call Chocolate City. Now all you see is a vanilla sky. Man, that'll kill your vibe. Then turn on the news for the realest lies. Damn, man, that is crazy when children cry. 45, make them want to grab a 45. Nazis, what is this, 1945? Progressive white, so horrified. Black people, like we tried to tell y'all, you ignored the signs. Trudeau, I need a visa, please order mine. All my Chicano peeps can sneak me through the borderline. That slogan on that red hat was so popular. Who knew it meant marching with torches and waving swastikas? Welcome to the whitest house. Slave souls haunt the halls when the light is out. They suck the blood of the poor and don't wipe their mouth. The last gas of a world that is dying out. Welcome to the whitest house, where every room is a tomb that they lie about. Where you can put your filthy feet on the finest couch, and for the right amount, you can even buy it out. When the anthem plays, I'ma sit next to Colin Kaepernick and Marshawn Lynch. Shout out to all my Africans, descendants of those victims of slave trafficking. The men that captured them, they built statues to champion. And what religion were they practicing? Burning crosses in the Oval Office, while Omarosa and Ben Carson defend racists in the same place Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. White minds with black faces, a nation indoctrinated in hatred in need of an operation. Approval rating less than 1/3 of the population, who took off their hoods so their identity's not mistaken. America's greatness, we not debating. Her history of murder and raping, we not erasing. Kill Mexicans, kill blacks, and kill natives, cause a real American can only be Caucasian. Welcome to the whitest house. Slave souls off the halls when the light is out. They suck the blood of the poor and don't wipe their mouth. The last gas of a world that is dying out. Everybody, welcome to the whitest house, where every room is a tomb that they lie about. Where you can put your filthy feet on the finest couch, and for the right amount, you can even buy it out. What's up, y'all? Yeah. So I want to do one more for you, if y'all don't mind. This is kind of a, I want to dedicate this. A couple days ago was the birthday of, to me, when you talk about one of the greatest MCs of all time, arguably the best flow and delivery of all time, was a rapper named Notorious B.I.G. Y'all know Notorious B.I.G.? So he did a famous song called the 10 Crack Commandments, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to take that song and like bring it up today and talk about some things that we go through today. So can you cue that for me? Let's go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
It's the 10 Frisk Commandments. What? So I just want to talk about, like, particularly if you black and brown, you know, you might have intersections with the police that might not go according to plan. So this is just 10 steps you can follow. So if you deal with the police, we can survive. We can live another day. We can breathe. Y'all with me? Look, I've been stopped and frisked for years. They treat us like we animals. I'm so used to it. I wrote me a manual, a step-by-step booklet, so you can get through your stop and frisk before they cock and spit. Rule number 1, never carry a gun. Even if you got a license, it might be a crisis. See, if you make a move for your waist, it's the slightest, they'll empty every round and they clip to you lifeless. Rule number 2, in fact, make no sudden moves. Don't you know these bad boys use violence to silence? They'll treat you like your highness, a king. I done seen mad kids get their whiz coat busted over nothing. Number 3, never trust no police. Them cops will set a brother up, gun him up, then cover up whenever they run amok and come and bust on one of us. It's never just this, cause it's only just us. Number 4, I know y'all heard this before. Always comply and pray to God you survive. Number 5, never talk back when they talk smack. Even if they call you a nigga, man, be the bigger man. 6, then you can run and jet quick, get it. They'll catch you, then beat you so bad you won't forget it. Number 7, this rule is so underrated. Always try to stay in places well lit and populated. Cause when streets is watching, police get cautious, so you won't survive without getting beat and hauled. And number 8, any weight that you carry's a risk. They catch you with a nick, they'll beat you like you hustling bricks. Number 9 should have been number 1 to me. Anytime you get stopped, always film the police. Cause if you get a whipping, they ain't trying to listen. You'll be sitting in prison if you don't see it with their vision. Number 10, a strong word called the Constitution. Or does it apply then to only white men? Is being black and brown probable cause? Hell no. Then why we getting stopped? Rain, sleet, hail, snow? Follow these rules, you'll have more days to wake up. If not, cops will roll up and shoot the place up. Slugs in his temple, watch this frame shake up. The caretaker did his makeup. When he passed, the cops, they ain't even break up. No charge, they ain't miss a day or get a pay cut. It's only us that get stopped if they say it ain't racist. Gotta go before a po-po come and take us. Yeah. So I hope that I gave you some lessons to learn, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you was jotting it down in a notebook, you know what I'm saying? So we can survive, you know what I'm saying? But the real answer is our unity, you know what I'm saying? That's why I have one hood on the hat. Because if all oppressed people come together, right? Collectively, we will get justice, we will get freedom, we will get equality. I'm just serious, y'all. Thank y'all for listening. Peace and love. Woo! We rising today, y'all.
Jasiri X. Jasiri X. Let's hear it again for Jasiri X. That's a deep brother right there. So if you're going to share on any of your socials, please, please, please make sure you hashtag WeRiseLA. If you're going to tweet, Instagram, Facebook, whatever your preference. WeRiseLA. Hashtag WeRiseLA. So in true We Rise fashion, we want to give the stage over to some young folks who are in our community, both who are impacted by the criminal justice system. We have 2 beautiful women coming to join us. Genesee Green is a freshman at Cypress High School in Orange County. Her father, Stephen, has been incarcerated for 26 years. Genesee and her sister Jaden have been a part of the Peace for Grace family since 2009. Her father has been able to record reading books to them over the years through that organization, the Peace for Grace. I'm so sorry. Place for Grace. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Place for Grace. The Place for Grace. Jessica De La Mora graduated from Venice High School in 2017, her only regret being that her father, Mike, could not see her walk the stage. He has been in prison since Jessica was 3. Jessica has presented She was presented of her Pops Club at Venice, has been published in 3 of the Pops anthologies, as well as in Kids Spirit magazine and the Good Men Project, and represented Pops the Club at the White House in 2016. Please welcome to the stage Jessica de la Mora.
Hello, everyone. Okay. My piece is called Fatherless Girl. I'm lucky enough to remember his hugs.
Talk into the microphone. Closer.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm lucky enough to remember him, his hugs. I mean, I think the memories, either that or dreams. My dad, a big-hearted man to his daughters and his family. To others, a scary, tough criminal in Corcoran State Prison, locked up since 2003. I've heard so many stories. He's in for slinging drugs, for running from the cops, for violating his probation. I've never known the truth. I remember waking up at 4 a.m. every morning to visit him in prison. 4 a.m. to visit him in prison. A 4-hour drive to the middle of nowhere in California. Standing outside the facility in the cold. Prison guards treating us somewhere between rude and disrespectful. Passing through a metal detector. Being patted down, filling out forms, told what I can and cannot wear. No blue, no red, no designer clothes, no hoodies, no tight blouses, no short skirts, not too many layers of clothing, wireless bras only, might as well go in naked. They always find something to give you a hard time and steal away precious minutes from the visit. Makes me feel like a criminal myself, when all I want to be is daddy little girl for an hour or two on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you.
My name is Genesee Green, and this is my truth. I am 14 years old, and my father's name is Stephen Green. My father has been incarcerated since the day I was born, which has been my whole life. He was sentenced to the life without the possibility of parole. I've grown up in the prisons. I've spent most holidays, birthdays, and weekends there. I've never known what my dad was like outside of prison. I've never seen him in normal clothing. I've never experienced anything normal like most other kids have. When I was younger, I always had assumed that it was normal to be away from him until I realized that other kids had their dads at home. It never really bothered me until about 3 years ago when I really wanted him home. Growing up, I never understood why he was in prison. I never understood why we had to drive so far to see my dad. I never understood why he wasn't home all the time and why he couldn't just be home, why he couldn't just leave the prison and come home to us. I was embarrassed and ashamed. I didn't think anyone would understand. I never told my friends where my dad was because I thought they would make fun of me. This trauma has made me fall into a deep depression to the extent where I was hurting myself, leaving my body covered with self-harm scars. Now, I am currently seeking help to bring me back to a healthier and happier state. I hope other kids in my situation know that it is okay and they are not alone. I'm using my voice to share today with you all. I'm so proud of my dad, and I know that he is proud of me. My dad has applied for a commutation of sentence, and I pray and hope that the governor commutes his sentence, and my dad can return to not only society, but to my family as well. I miss and love my father dearly, and I need him home. Thank you.
All right, let's hear it for Genesee and Jessica. Thank you. All right. We have more programming for you that is going to be an interesting conversation, and I hope that, depending on how much they have to say, we might even be able to get a few questions in at the end for our audience to ask. So I want to bring someone to the stage who I've known for over 5 years. This is a brother that I've been working with for quite some time. He's near and dear to my heart. He's our moderator for tonight. This is, I want to say doctor, but you have every other degree, but not that yet. So let's welcome to the stage our moderator, Bryonn Bain, who's an amazing, amazing, amazing artivist. He has an amazing story of his own. I hope you all get an opportunity to see lyrics from Lockdown. Come on out, Bryonn. To see lyrics from Lockdown. It's an amazing show. So Bryonn has started the prison education programs out of NYU, UCLA. He has worked with the Columbia University as well. He's has multiple degrees from Columbia, NYU, Harvard. He's a trained lawyer. He's an advocate in the prison education and the prison justice movement. He also has a literacy program that he has in multiple facilities, including juvenile hall. So we are in the great hands of an incredible moderator. Please give it up again for Bryonn Bain.
Thank you. Peace, family. Really, that's it? That's what I'm talking about. So make some noise for Gina Belafonte and Christina Pacheco. Praise to the Most High, to the ancestors, to the elders. We ask permission to speak. I want to start off by also recognizing that we are on indigenous land, on stolen land. The Tongva Nation was first here before anybody else. I want to acknowledge that the original sins of colonization and genocide and slavery are inseparable from our current realities of white supremacy, patriarchy, hyper-capitalism, which are at the root of so much of what we're experiencing and talking about today. So to honor the indigenous, the native peoples, we want to start off in that way and in that spirit. And I want to bring up our guests. We have a powerhouse group of folks coming to the stage. It's a real privilege for me to be able to be in conversation, for all of us to be in conversation with these folks today. So I want to go ahead and bring them up. First of all, the new executive director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, author of Righting My Wrongs, Mr. Ted himself, Shaka Senghor.
Hey. ARC in the building. Oh, man, it's beautiful out here.
It's beautiful, it is. Brother who is a resident advisor whose experiences have informed his analysis, insight, and his work to this day at ARC in housing, one of the critical needs of folks coming home from behind the bars. Please give it up for Joe Aguilar. I share a special connection with the sister I'm about to bring. She was part of Beyond the Bars on the East Coast while I was still on the East Coast. And she's the founder and executive director of the Ladies of Hope Ministries. Show your love for Topeka Sam.
Come on, you could do better than that. What's up? Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, I gotta say, in addition to being one of the first organizers of Black Lives Matter here in LA, in addition to being the chair of the Pan-African Studies Department at Cal State LA, I gotta say, on par with all of that, we also share that we not only live in Mid-City, but we are both soccer parents, which means basically on the weekends we're Lyft drivers. Please put your hands together, show your love for Melina, Abdullah. So I want to jump right into it. We're here to talk about the impact of incarceration on our families, and I want to jump right in, you know, as a parent and as someone who just this morning I spent this morning, like I spend several mornings every week, at the juvenile hall in Sylmar at BJN, where recently they had a young person, a young brother who was 9 years old, who was incarcerated at the facility. And it was just devastating to realize that they're taking our babies at that early age. So I want to ask each of my brothers and sisters here to tell us what, in your opinion, are the consequences that children face when they're caged behind bars? What are the consequences that the youngest of the young face when they experience incarceration? In no particular order.
Okay, well, I'll answer. I'm Joel, anyways, by the way. So yeah, I think the cycle of trauma continues when you take, I grew up a couple miles away from here on the southwest area of Los Angeles, and it's different. It's something normal to us, but it can be negative and destructive to the rest of America. So you go to sleep, hearing gunshots, helicopters. And if you want to make things worse, if your parents are dealing with addiction, then maybe they can wake up, not wake up to dress you and to feed you to go to school. And if you want to make things a little bit grimmer, what if they're addicted to crack? And what if through their pregnancy they use crack? Then what do you have now but crack babies? So it's very difficult. Dehumanization begins from the very conception, and it just continues. It continues in the neighborhood, it continues in school, it continues in prison or in juvenile hall to prison.
Melina.
So, I hesitated on this question because it's such an appalling question, right? What's the effect of incarceration on our children? The notion that our children can be caged, the notion the response that the state gives to our children, and we want to be real clear, we're talking specifically about black and brown children and poor children who are targeted for incarceration. The notion that they can see them as something other than children is appalling, and it's shocking when you ask the. And then I started to think, because before anything, I'm a mother, right? And I have 3 children. I have a daughter 14, another daughter that's 11, and a son that's 8. And just kind of processing the question, I thought about the fact that 2 of my 3 children have already been targeted for criminalization. Now, I'm a college professor. I grew up in the hood. We live right outside the hood right now, right? But they have resources that many of our children don't have. My daughter, my 11-year-old daughter, was 7 years old the first time the police were called on her in school. And they came, the principal told me if I didn't beat the police there, they were gonna take her into custody for bringing vitamin C to campus because they have a zero tolerance policy, right? My son, as a first grader, right before the end of first grade happened, we got a visit to my house from the gang unit for my first grade son, right? So when we talk about what's happening to our children, I think that there was a report that came out at the beginning of this year by the Economic Policy Institute, and it looked at comparatively where we are as black people now in 2018 as opposed to where we were in 1968, and it found that by every measure, we're worse off now than we were in 1968. And the conclusion, and if anybody knows anything about the Economic Policy Institute, it is not a radical think tank, right? The conclusion that they reached is that the reason we're worse off is because of this society's failure, and I'll say it's worse than that, it's a refusal to directly address racism, right? And so what we're experiencing is what we've been experiencing since the moment we were stolen from Africa, since the moment we were told that we were chattel. They tried to create us into these dehumanized beings instead of people, right? They're treating our children exactly the way that they treated them when we were enslaved. And so this is why they can take our children and lock them in cages, take our children and treat them like they're not people. And I think that that's why we're appalled, because we've been told that we've been done with slavery, right? But not really.
I want to ask Shaka and Topeka to think about it in an additional way, which is to say that what is not only impact on our young people, but what is the impact on the families of these young people, right? The parents, the brothers and sisters. How are the folks who are experiencing incarceration, by losing their child to the system for the period of time that they're incarcerated? What's that impact? What's that effect?
So when you asked that question, the first thing that came to mind was Kalief Browder. That's what prison does to kids.
Can you explain for folks who aren't familiar with this case, please?
So Kalief Browder was a young man in New York who was arrested for a crime he didn't commit. At the age of 15, he was incarcerated on Rikers Island, where he remained for 3 years, 2 of which was in solitary confinement. The crushing weight and reality of solitary confinement damaged him to such a point that when he got released, he ended up committing suicide. The reality is when kids go into that environment, the trauma is so penetrating and so deep that they never come out the same. I'm very fortunate to work in a space that allows us to actually go inside and work with these young men and women to ensure that they're not broken beyond repair. But this is what our system does to young people. And the impact it has on families is devastating. I was a producer on a show called Release, which some of you guys may have seen, and it showed the other side of coming home, and it shows the other side of the impact of incarceration that it has on families and how devastating it is to try to go see your loved one when you can't afford to try to take those phone calls that oftentimes cost more than mortgages, cost more than rent, to try to go see your loved one in prisons that's so far from home that they might as well be in another country. This is what we do to people in this country. In Germany, where I went and studied their prison system, they're very intentional about ensuring that if you happen to be incarcerated, that you maintain a relationship with your family and your loved ones. Like it's part of their constitution. Because they recognize the men and women who run afoul of the law as their fellow citizens. In this country, we recognize them as those people over there. That's right. And that's problematic.
Thank you. Topeka.
I think the only thing that I would add is when I think about young people, when I think about youth incarceration, I think about our young girls. And I think about how, 86% of women who are incarcerated are women who suffered sexual trauma, abuse, or violence. And that's women, that's reported, right? Because some people don't talk about the trauma that they've experienced. So I think about that woman who was a young girl. And when young girls are abused and victimized and criminalized, and how they're ripped out of schools and put in prisons or baby jails. And I think about, how black women and women of color are always looked at as criminal, even from, just because of the color of our skin. And, it's just such a heavy question. I think that's why I kind of waited, because, our girls turn into women. And then our women end up in prison. They end up in, relationships that have them suffering and in life. Our sisters are dying in prison, based on just these systems and these abuses and just the decades of trauma. And so, I just want to lift up all of our young girls and our women that's in this space. Just like the young sisters who came on just a moment ago, we have to love on each other, and we have to recognize in each other the beauty in each other. And when we see each other struggling, that we have to be there to lift each other up.
Thank you. Thank you. So there is somewhat of a taboo, especially with black folks, in talking about mental health in some circles, right? There's a lot of folks who don't like to talk about mental health issues, and it's so critical that we do talk about it, because it's something that so many of us are facing on a daily basis. We have now more people in prisons in this country than we have with mental health issues and concerns than we have in mental health institutions. And over the last several decades, we've seen, while nationwide, the closing of mental health facilities because of the unspeakable abuses we've seen in mental health institutions around the country. We've also seen the unprecedented expansion of the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration. Neither one of those is an acceptable way to deal with the mental health issues that we're facing in our communities, even as we see the criminalization of those with mental ailments in our communities. So why has this happened, and what strategies should we be pursuing to address this issue?
It's happened because we've allowed it to happen. It's happened because we've given people power or submitted to their power. We've given the folks power who are invested in creating these conditions, right? So here in Los Angeles, 53% of the city's general fund goes to LAPD directly, right? But then there's more than that because there's money that's hidden. So yesterday, every week we go to police commission meeting. Well, Tuesday, I guess it was the day before yesterday, we go to police commission meeting. We just, as voters, as Angelenos, voted for these funds, HHH funds, to address homelessness. Do you know where the city directed those funds? To LAPD. Because LAPD is seen by this city's governance as the front line for everything, right? LAPD for the city and the jails for the county, right? They're proposing to spend $3.5 billion on a new jail in Los Angeles. We already know the LA County jail system is the largest mental health provider. Not that jails can provide mental health, because we know that folks who go into jails and prisons with mental health conditions have those conditions exacerbated when they're on the inside because they're traumatized. And that's what Brother Shaka was talking about that happened with Khalif. But you also see it, the Central Park Five, when you talk to them, when you see them, you know that these conditions have been exacerbated. So we have allowed our so-called leaders to prioritize things in a way that work for the few, right? So jails, prisons, police work for the few, right? The rest of us, especially if you're seen as not quite human, if you're black, if you're brown, if you're poor, if you're houseless, if you suffer from mental health challenges, right, are seen as kind of food for that system. And so we have a choice to claim power. We have a choice to say, we are the leaders we've been waiting for. And we have the capacity to shift things. One of the people that's outside, I hope that you all have all been signing the Reform LA County Jails petition, right? Where we're saying we want to divest from jails. We want to invest in real mental health services. We want to invest in rehabilitative services. We want to invest. The answer to homelessness is not more police on the streets, right? It's house keys, not handcuffs, right? And so we have to commit ourselves to fighting against the very same system that evolved from, you opened with, this country is based on genocide and the stealing of indigenous land and unpaid black labor and the dehumanization of black people, right? That's what's evolved, that's what's in power. We can see it in DC like we can't see it nowhere else, right? So what is our response? What is the new anti-slavery movement, the new anti-lynching movement, the new Black Power movement, the new Chicano Power movement? What does that look like, and what are we committed to do to making sure that we topple this kind of system once and for all?
Yes, yes. Topeka, I'm not gonna let you wait till the end of the go-around this time. And but for a particular reason, I know I've had a chance to do some work at the California Institute for Women, CIW, the oldest prison for women still working, still functioning in California. And 90% of the women there are incarcerated and have experienced some form of abuse, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, often at the hands of a man who they retaliated against. And I know at least one or two of the students that were in my classes are here tonight. I want to give it up for them for making it out, for being here. Wendy Staggs, all right, here we go. On the crew here tonight for We Rise. And part of what's happened there, though, also is that they have the highest suicide rate in the country, right? 5 times the national average, 8 times the state average. So what in your work, specifically in your work, has been your experience in coming into contact with mental health issues, with the women you work with, and what are some strategies that your organization has been pursuing?
Yeah, for sure. So, when I think about my direct experiences when I was incarcerated, and I think about, the women that I would see, people who've been incarcerated, you all know about Pill Line, right? And I remember just hearing the Pill Line call and seeing probably more than 50% of the women who were in the places that I was going to line up for Pill Line. And I remember, not really understanding what that looked like and why, right? It was like, okay, why is everybody going to get something just to take themselves out of a situation that they've just come from, And I would continue to ask these questions, and then I started to find out that people were just being medicated and they were being pushed into a different level of addiction, and then they would go out, and then they would be looking for the same things that they were on, and then they would be having to cope and substitute that with the same drugs that they were addicted to before they went in, and then it would be, they couldn't get jobs because of the criminal conviction, they couldn't get housing because of all these barriers, and then it would be back to just what they knew that landed them back in prison. And so the work that I do, specifically at the Ladies of Hope Ministries, we help women through education, entrepreneurship, advocacy, and spiritual empowerment. And when I think about mental health, and I know you had said earlier, we don't talk about it in a lot of our communities, specifically in communities of color. A lot of times, I know even traumas and things that I had been through, it was like, we talked about it internally, then you don't talk about it again, and you pray. And that's the way that we're supposed to handle things. And I'm a firm believer in prayer, and prayer does change things, but I also know through my experience that if I had have gone to a specialist and talked through some of the issues that I had been through, that my life, as it related to relationships and things that I had been in, abusive relationships, and the cycle of abuse that I found myself in, wouldn't have landed me through all of the victimizations and things that I had in my own life. And so, I try to help women and really giving them these access so that they can tap into their spiritual self. And once really understanding what that looks like, then also tap them into different, services, whether it is speak to a social worker that actually is faith-based. And it doesn't matter to me who you're connected to. I know from my journey that I connect with God, and that's what got me through. And so I feel like if a person is able to connect to whatever higher power that they do, that also helps them through different treatments, and that can also give them a level of accountability. So that's a lot of the stuff that we do.
So, Joe and Shaka, you both spent a considerable amount of time behind the walls and have come home activists, as leaders in this movement. And so I really want to get your sense of what are the resources and services that are available to folks when they come home? What was your experience of mental health issues inside and what you experienced firsthand, and then coming home? So what are the greatest resources and the greatest gaps in those resources for folks when they come home?
I think that something that's not being said is that, this is like there's an emotional and a spiritual aspect to this as well. And that comes through, volunteers. Like in prison, for example, we get help because volunteers come and they spend time. And that's something that's very essential for the human person, to be humanized, to be heard, to be seen. And this is what we do out here with ARC as well. It's like a family. It's the human contact. Is to be present, and I think that we need that. I think that's very essential. Look, there's a psychological factor to this. There's also biological. If it's genetic, I don't know, but there's also societal factors. And I think that, we as a community need to be involved, and we need to spend time. Quick numbers. By the age of 18, once you turn 18, you would spend 158 hours on Earth. 158. So if you go to school every day, 180 days, 6 days, for 6 days a week, the number totals 13,000 hours. When you combine that, just think about that. That's 9% of time that you're under the leverage or under the influence of education of a school. Now, the other 91%, who's influencing you? And when you add, like I said, the negative, the destructive, the destruction in our neighborhoods, in our homes, who is influencing our children? 91%. I was amazed, but that's my life. That's my life. That's what led me to this criminal lifestyle, that led me to prison. And in there, it was a shift. Something happened because people took interest, groups, process groups. For example, the chapel, spirituality. And I think that's the element that we're missing. A lot of our mental health brothers in prison are neglected, like even from prisoners. But if you offer them a piece of coffee, if you offer them coffee, a piece of bread, all of a sudden they just kind of react and they're responsive. And I don't know, you know, when I was a kid, I used to model my father because I looked up to him. And I think that as humans, we model each other in the same way. And I think that if we just take, that's the element that I think that we kind of overlook.
Thank you, thank you.
So I spent a total of 19 years in prison. 7 of those years was in solitary confinement. What I witnessed in solitary confinement was unimaginable. The intentional breaking and destroying of the human mind. I watched man after man lose their mental faculties up under the strict watch of the state. To me, it's one of America's blind spots. As a country, we've fallen asleep at the wheel. And we've allowed a level of suffering, dehumanization, degradation of our fellow citizens, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our cousins, our loved ones, our suffering. Anytime that you lock a human being in a cell for 23 hours a day, for extended periods of time, that's intentional torture. They say that the majority of people begin to lose their mind within the first 90 days of being in solitary confinement. I've watched that happen in the first 90 hours. Because a lot of these men that I was around, they had already suffered adverse childhood experiences early in their childhood. Most of us went to prison with PTSD and came out with compounded PTSD because we've never got treated for the things that we deal with in our community. To be black, to be brown, to be poor and white in America is to have a mental illness, is to be afflicted by the trauma that you see around you in your everyday interactions as a human being. You can't exist in this country when you fall up under one of those otherings. Like it's not healthy that when you drive and you see a police and you automatically shrink as a human being. That impacts you psychologically. It's not okay when you're a child and you experience your first murder before you experience your first graduation. That's mental trauma. We expect our children to see life through a lens that oftentimes isn't that clear. For people who have never been traumatized, who have never been around gun violence, who have never been around police brutality, they're seeing the world through these crystal clear lenses. For our kids who the first time they were struck and told that it was done out of love, even though it was hurtful and it's harmful, they begin to see that life from that point forward through those same glasses that have been dipped in the mud of abuse, harm, and hurt. From that point forward, you can't see life clearly. And so what's happening in our prisons and what we're seeing is the normalization of the abnormal. We don't think nothing about a human being being trapped in solitary confinement for 7 years. Sometimes our first response is, what did he do? What did the system actually do? You know, when we see our children being drugged out of classrooms, and we're justifying that as adults, that's mental illness. When we have to question a person being shot in the back in this country, and our first reaction is, what if he just didn't resist? That's our collective mental illness. And the way that shows up is the normalization of this idea that we will turn in and out of prison. You know, I'm fortunate as the incoming new executive director of ARC to work with amazing human beings. Amazing human beings. We have therapists because we realize that you can't go through that traumatic experience and walk the path of freedom alone. We have life coaches because we know that we all need a little bit of help to get to that next level. But more importantly, we have a commonness of community to where when I look at this brother, we can communicate without even talking. When I look at this sister who has been through some of the most harmful, degrading experiences, and we have an understanding that you just don't have if you've never walked in our shoes. That's a model that should be replicated in every community throughout this country. Every community throughout this country.
That's right. That's right.
And in order for that to happen, we have to be honest about what we're intentionally doing to people in this country. It is not okay to lock kids up for the rest of their lives. Right. It's not okay to lock people away in cages for hours upon hours upon hours, when if you did that to an animal, if you did that to little Sparky, you put little Sparky ass in the cage for 7 days straight, 23 hours without letting him out, Peter will be at your door.
That's right. That's right.
But you can do it to Sam.
Right.
You can do it to Samantha. You can do it to Terrence. You can do it to Shaka. Until we change that reality, we'll always be dealing with these issues.
So Shaka touched on this eloquently, and I want to put it out there to everyone before we get to a place of opening it up for questions. You know, there's deep structural forces, right, at the root of much of the harm in Black and brown communities. I want to open up the space to talk about what those structural forces are. We talked about it a little bit, but I want to explicitly call out what are the larger structural institutional forces that are behind not just poverty, but everything that's linked to leading us to incarceration. And like the second part of this is really, what are the most effective alternatives to prisons and to police, right, that you see in your work and would recommend we take a more serious look at to avoid using those as tactics to deal with the problems in our communities that police and prisons only make worse and don't do anything to really solve. Melina.
Okay. I mean, I think we need to be real explicit, right? We live under a system of white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism, right? That is the structure we live under, right? We can't pretend like the system isn't racist, like the system is colorblind, like Black people are treated like everybody else, and we need to also be clear, and I'm processing and talking at the same time, so that's never a good idea, but I'm still gonna do it, so I pray that the words that come out are right. I think it's important to look at the way in which white supremacy affects different communities differently, right? So anti-Blackness is a particular form of white supremacy, right? And so we have to be very clear about the ways in which Black people are targeted by the state. This doesn't mean that poor white folks aren't targeted by the state. It doesn't mean that Latinx folks aren't targeted by the state, but I think that we need to look at how that targeting looks different for each community, because that also means that even though there's lots of solidarity, there's also very clear ways in which we have to resist. So we have to recognize we live under a white supremacist state. And I don't think anybody can miss it right now, because we have like a blatant white supremacist,
right,
patriarchal capitalist in the damn White House, right? And he's doing it, and this regime is doing it in every single way. They're carrying out that mission in every single way, right? So if we think about, you know, the rhetoric that comes out, right? What did he say yesterday about the national anthem, right? If you don't want to stand for the national anthem, maybe you don't need to be in this country. Maybe you don't need to be in this country, homie, right?
Talk about it.
So there's the rhetoric, but we also need to think about how that rhetoric translates into both policy and also violence on the ground, right? So policy in terms of how the prison system and how police harass and abuse our folks, right? We're seeing for the one of the first times, actually, this is the highest number to date of police killings, right? In terms of keeping record of numbers of numbers of people who were killed by police, this year exceeds previous years, right? We're also seeing a surge for the first time on record in hate crimes, right? So since hate crime statistics have been kept, there's always been a downward trend. This is the first time, actually, this isn't the first time. It was the months that right before the election took place, you saw a surge in hate crimes. So that rhetoric empowers violent white supremacy, right? We also need to think about the way that patriarchy plays in. So oftentimes we talk about the men who were imprisoned, but I'm glad that you're here, sis, and we need to talk about the way in which black women are targeted for imprisonment, right? We need to think about that the vast majority of those of us who are in prison have mental health conditions, and it's gendered. Black women suffer with mental health conditions who are imprisoned at even higher rates than black men, right? We need to also think about capitalism, and I know that some people they do two things. They like to sum everything up. You know, those on the left say everything is just about class. It's just about class, and if we just engage in class struggle, we'd be free, right? But then there's people on the other side who say, you know, we can neglect it. We have to understand, Manning Marable, if you haven't read the book, How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, like that needs to be on your summer reading list, right? At the conclusion of that book, he says the road to black liberation must also be the road to socialist revolution, right? And what he's talking about is the intertwining of racism. He doesn't talk explicitly about sexism, but sexism is in there, and of class struggle. And so when you talk about these systems are what created policing. These systems are what is expanding the prison industrial complex, that's trying to expand LA jails, right? That's what the system is doing. And then we need to think about how do we resist. And that resistance needs to take place in many different forms. So we have to vote. We have to engage in that, and I know that's not always popular. I don't happen to vote for mainstream candidates very often, but you know, we do have to elect folks, and voting can make a difference. We can think about cities like Newark, New Jersey that elected Ras Baraka. We can think about Jackson, Mississippi, where we elected Chokwe Antar Lumumba. Kat Brooks, the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project, is running for mayor of Oakland, right? We can think about these opportunities to elect folks, and some people go, we shouldn't vote. Look, the Black Panther Party ran Elaine Brown and Bobby Seale for office, so this ain't not revolutionary to run for office, right? It's part of our history. But this is what we've done. We've left it in the hands of these elected folks to lead us. We've never won that way. You can't give up the struggle on the ground. So I know y'all want to come to forums or say I voted and now I'm done. Put that little sticker, you know, that stupid sticker they give you when you vote, right? Okay, maybe wear the sticker, right? But you haven't done, you're not finished with your work because you have an I voted sticker on, right? You're finished with your work when you've given everything you can to honor our ancestors, when you've given everything that you can to honor those warriors who've walked before us by giving all that you can to the struggle for our liberation. And that means signing petitions, that means voting, but it also means it's Ramadan. So I'm gonna just say, shut stuff down. That's not actually our chant, right? But shut stuff down. We gotta shut stuff down as long as we allow white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism to churn as if there's nothing happening. They're gonna keep doing what they're doing and pour more into the system that keeps us oppressed.
Ashe. And Ramadan Mubarak. Go ahead, Shaka.
She always just drops so many jewels. Thank you. Appreciate you.
We can always take a moment of silence after Melina speaks. Absorb it, you know, just.
No, I mean, I think it's so important. So my personal belief is that all too often we allow people to control our energy through their unhealthy narratives. every time the current administration says something, we find ourselves in emotional turmoil. To me, there's nothing more disempowering than playing pity politics, meaning that you're looking for people to pity you because you're allowing somebody to hurt your feelings. I believe in empowerment is what disrupts and turns over systems. We have to stop wasting so much of our energy worrying about what they're not doing and worry about what we can do.
That's right.
Period. Like the world wasn't changed by somebody whining about somebody else. It's changed because people actually got up and did something.
That's right.
And made it happen.
That's right.
Recently, we had a lot of controversy. We recently had a lot of controversy currently around a bill that's currently sitting in the House. And this bill is a criminal justice reform bill. And some of my esteemed colleagues were invited to the White House. And because we're so emotional around the issue, people attacked these men and women who fight every day against the system. No days off, no sleep. The sister Topeka sitting right here is one of my personal heroines. She fights every day for dignity for women who are incarcerated. Every day. And when she walked into that White House, people judged her. And it pissed me off because I know her spirit, I know her heart, I know her commitment, I know her passion, and I know her wisdom. And she's wise enough to know that when there are these moments where these conversations are being had, we have a responsibility to step in those rooms even when we dislike the company that we know we'll be keeping. That is our responsibility. We have to push the envelope. We have to challenge these systems by actually doing the real work. Making a tweet that sounds fancy and sounds smart, it's not real work. You probably didn't even get off the bed or off the toilet to do that. Real talk, y'all know y'all be up in the morning like, what's popping up here? Little legs be all numb when y'all get up. All right, let's go. But I'm serious in the sense that we have to be mindful of what we're doing to people. It was unfair of them to treat my colleagues like that. I was actually invited, and had I not had a prior commitment, I would have went, because it's my responsibility. Right. We have been duped into believing that people who haven't worked in our best interests are serving us. While we criticize this sister and the rest of my colleagues, we celebrated Bill Clinton. We celebrated Hillary Clinton when they passed some of the worst criminal justice bills in the history of this country. So we have to stop playing pity politics. We have to develop more critical thinkers. We have to have more critical analysis. But most importantly, when you don't like what's happening, we got to get off our ass and get out there and make it happen and build the shit that we want to see. Period.
So before we open it up, I want to ask Joel and Topeka to jump in on this, but I really want to focus the question in a very specific way. Part of what I've heard from Melina, from Shaka, is this sentiment really challenging the idea, the popular idea, that the system is broken, right? This idea that the system is broken, and if we could only just fix it and make it work better, if we could just, tape up the edges and bandage it up, and when in fact, the system is actually working exactly as it was designed to work. Absolutely. Right? And so we need to really shift the paradigm of our thinking and begin thinking about how do we actually break a system that is functioning as it was designed and replace it with something that is more humane, transform it into something that is humane, because it was not designed to be humane, and it has never functioned that way, all right? So my specific question for you, Joel and Topeka, is what are the skills that the folks in this room coming into this work need to have? What are the skills that are most needed right now in terms of the training and preparation? We got a lot of spirit being willing, but if the flesh is weak, if the flesh is not prepared, if folks are not properly, set up to actually do the work, then the work can't get done the way it needs to. And y'all are on the front lines of this work every day. What are the skills you need to see more of in terms of preparation for folks who are engaging in this movement that y'all are in the leadership of?
Well, first I want to thank you, Shaka, for those words, because it has been incredibly difficult over the last week. And thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. I really appreciate that. I love you. And so when I think about the skills that are needed, I think about, I'm a spirit animal, right? So I think about just having the spirit of humility. I think in doing this work, you have to remain humble. You have to learn how to put your ego aside, and you have to always check your own intentions. I've learned in the last 3 years, because I'm new to just this movement, I'm new to this work. Since my release from prison in 2015 is when I really got involved. And it's been these different times. It's times when people want to come together and you want to build coalition, you want to collaborate, when you believe that you're following the same mission and goals. And then when people start to elevate based on, their learning and understanding, then we want to pull and hold each other back and criticize people. I think we need to start to look at this beast as a beast, and that we need to understand that each of us up here have a different lane. And we all need to, and each of you in here have a different lane. And you just need to find what that lane is, right? And if it's not your lane, then you have to learn how to seed and to give it to someone else. Like this sister was kicking and dropping jewels. There's no need for me to add anything to what she's saying, right? Because she got it. And then sometimes when you just sit back and you listen, you can learn. And then when you learn, you can develop a different way of critical thinking. And then I think what's incredibly important too in learning through this last week is, the adage of reading is fundamental. That if you don't do, and I'm going to go back again to a course I took when I first came home, was biblical exegesis. And I remember being in this course, and there were all these theologians and PhD this person, and I'm just new. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this class, with all these brilliant minds. And the professor was like, you are going to be one of the best people in this class because you're coming here with an open heart and an open mind. Like I wasn't coming in there with these beliefs based on things that I had learned before, but it was also about just because a person says that the Bible says this, you need to read it for yourself. And I think about these bills and I think about these laws, and I know that I have been doing my work based on spirit work, but I also, in learning and moving in this work, you depend on your elders and your allies a lot of times in the work. And sometimes we just go ahead and we sign off on things and we don't look at it because we believe that the person who is teaching us is telling us the right thing to do. And then you soon learn that people have their own political agendas, their own intentions, and a lot of times it's not even for the people that they're supposed to be serving. And so what I've learned is that it is incredibly important for you to do your own due diligence, to take your time, whether it's to read to understand, whether it's to learn to heal, because we can't lead unless we really have healed ourselves. Because then what you end up doing is pouring your trauma into someone else's trauma, and then that perpetuates trauma, and we have a big mess. So I think that to dismantle a system because we're not trying to fix it is to really transform yourself, and it starts from within.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's, and I'll start with what I said at the very beginning. We all have a stake at this. Just look at the model that what ARC has done here in California. At the forefront of changing laws, of going into prisons and sponsoring education, higher learning groups. And it's out here preparing. It's like there's a saying in recovery that you clean your own side of the street. And the men that are coming home are being received with open arms from their brothers who were in there. What we do out here, we do for the next man who's sitting in that cell thinking what he's going to do when he gets out. And it's about being involved. Mobility, I mean, the civil rights movement started with the people. We begin this change because we all have a stake at this. This is a national defense crisis. If another foreign country was doing this to us, this would be deemed as an act of war.
That's right.
So we all have to mobilize. We all have to be part of this solution. And look, if we shift the blame just on one entity, then the implication is that that one entity is going to fix our problems, and that's not true. That'll never happen. I take responsibility. That's what I learned in prison, and I'm out here paying it forward.
Thank you. So as I look to the team and we get ready to open it up for questions from everyone in the building who has a question, a brief question, a brief comment. I want to also say that when I think of ARC, I also want to acknowledge some of the other folks I know who've been doing this work for a very long time, A New Way of Life, Dignity and Power Now, Youth Justice Coalition, Inside Out Riders, right? Because it's a whole lot of folks who are doing this work, and it really does take all of us, and a bunch of folks I haven't mentioned, and we don't have time to mention right now, but I see you, I see you, I see you. So there should be a microphone or two that's circulating, and if there's anybody who has a question, and we're looking for a question, not a comment disguised as a question, but if you have a brief comment that leads into a question, we'll take that, but I want to encourage you to be brief with it. And so I see a hand over here, and I see a couple hands over here. So
Bryonn, we've got a question right here.
Where's the microphone?
Right here.
It's a little hard to see in the house, so back here? Okay. So please say your name and your question. Thank you.
My name is Antoinette Carter. I represent A New Way of Life.
Yes, yes.
My
Susan
mom
Burton,
created it.
Tiffany Johnson.
Susan Burton's my mom. I want to say to the audience, I'm a numbers person, and as my mom has been doing her work, I've been following the numbers. And as a taxpaying citizen, what scares me the most in California is that we have our governor spending $11.5 billion to fund 33 prisons in California. That's at a cost of about $76,000 per prisoner. And we are funding that as tax-paying citizens. They're taking money away from everything. And what bothers me is we don't have that. We're getting that information out, but I would like for us to be aware of the monies that are being spent and all of the money that we can divert to other programs and other things that will help people instead of incarcerating people. I mean, we're spending $76,000, the amount that it costs to send somebody to Harvard, just to lock somebody up every day, all day long.
That's right.
Thank you. Any response?
There's a website, $1 Million Hoods, that your colleague, Kelly Lytle Hernandez, developed. Please check it out because it is about the choices that we're making when we're
Website?
$1 Million Hoods. So what could we be doing with that money if we weren't spending it on incarceration? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I see a hand here, a hand there. Do we have a microphone?
I have a question right here. House left.
Okay. House left. All right. Please say your name.
Hi, my name is Aaron Bratton. With mass incarceration, it seems like a lot of it is stemmed in stigmatizing stereotypes. People that are decision makers, they make the decisions off of presumptions about people, groupthink like that. So how much do you think miseducation with American history plays a part? It seems like a lot of people don't know about convict leasing. They don't know about destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. And so if the school system isn't teaching proper American history, accurate and inclusive American history, people grow up not knowing that these stereotypes are rooted in history. They were made by the people in power. So do you think we could ever change the American history classes or implement like implicit bias training, something that addresses the stigmatizing stereotypes that lead to the mass incarceration?
Great question. So miseducation, stigmatization, stereotypes, how much of that is related to what we're talking about?
Thank you for asking that great question. One of my mentors, Joy Ito at MIT Media Lab, says education is what they do to you, learning is what you do for yourself. So I say that to say this. Ava DuVernay, in her brilliance, her artistic brilliance, directed the film 13th. It gave the most accurate historical breakdown of why our current prison system is what it is. It's not just stereotypes, it's actually written into the Constitution that involuntary servitude, nobody should be subjected to involuntary servitude except for those duly convicted of a crime. So basically through Constitution, slavery was reinvented in its modern form, also known as mass incarceration. So it's not so much a stereotyping as it is legislation, which is why it's so important for us to be in those rooms when it comes to trying to change policies and trying to undo the harm that the Constitution, which is the fabric of this country, has done over the course of many, many decades. So the more we learn, like we live in an era now where we don't have to be relying on educational institutions, which are basically like cousins of the prison industrial complex, so to speak. I mean, sometimes you walk in one, you can't tell the difference which one you're walking in, especially if you come from the hood. Like, I'm from Detroit, so walking to our school is like walking to San Quentin or Folsom, because it's real out there. But also the intention behind the school is just as catastrophic in terms of the outcome it's producing, where we're basically just training people to not think for themselves, which means when you can't think for yourself, you can't empower yourself, therefore you can't change the environment in a way that honors who you are. So it's all about learning. We have to stop relying on these broken institutions to inform us of the things that we need to know. Instead, let's take this opportunity to really build, go watch the film 13, start a conversation online where they no longer, well, I mean, it's still restrictive, but it's not as restrictive as the past where we couldn't communicate across all these spaces. So those are opportunities that we have right in front of us that we have to take advantage of.
Thank you. I've got a question.
Can I just quickly add to that?
Please.
I'll say there's also a difference between schooling and education, right? So we need to, I think Brother Shaka is absolutely right about, like, everybody's read, I think, Paulo Freire's work, right? And so we need to think about how do we build educational models that are liberatory, right? So we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Black studies, of ethnic studies. We need to think about what my discipline was created to do. It wasn't created by the institution. It was Black folks and brown folks and the Third World Liberation Front who demanded that the institutions be shut down so that we can build models of education that are actually liberatory. In LAUSD, and this is about the power of people, right? Just a couple years ago, it was students and teachers and community organizers who demanded that within LAUSD, we have an ethnic studies requirement. And so my daughter, who's now a 9th grader, is gonna be the first class of students who graduates with an ethnic studies requirement. Now, it doesn't fix everything that happens in the classroom, but it's very different. It adds tremendously to what they've been learning, and what it does is it teaches them that they have the power, that we have the power to transform systems, to topple systems that are oppressive and build something new.
Thank you. So, is there a microphone up here yet? If we get a microphone up here. Right now we have it back there. Please say your name, and then we'll come back up here. All right, she's had her hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name, my name is Patricia Russell, and this is an amazing night. Thank you so much. My son was in Twin Towers, and it's like being in a sardine can, if anyone's ever seen what it's like. And there's nothing for the inmates to do, and he was in jail mental health, and I heard about EBI, educational-based incarceration, and I asked if he could be part of that. I found out that none of the mentally ill mental health inmates were allowed to even be considered for EBI. And I just want to encourage you all to try to see if you could get more, because I went and I did a lot of activism about that, and now they do have it, but not enough. So I really think when they're in jail, try to help them move forward, because otherwise they get sicker, as you say. And do you have any other ideas about that? I'd love to know.
Topeka, Joe, either of you have a response? So, no? Okay. More of these kinds of services inside the facility. Yeah. All right. Right. Well, were there particular programs that you participated in that actually were more than just the usual okey doke programs inside the facility, programs that actually made a difference, made an impact, that you would like to see more of an investment in for folks who are in this room and committed to doing that kind of work?
Well, for me, there were none. I was in federal prison, and in the federal prison, in the 2 federal prisons that I was in, they had, for women, continuing, if you did not have your GED, then they offered the GED course. There were no Pell Grants, so if a person wanted to do any college courses, they didn't offer them in the prison, and you had to do a correspondence course, which you had to pay for. And you all know that, people are making $5 a month, so there's no way they could pay for a college course. And this is in federal prison. So for women, they offered us knitting and crocheting and beading and plastic canvassing. And it was really a joke. And so, I always say that for me, in my experience, that prison didn't change me. It was the women that were in there that did. So, your resources for me were right there through the sisters, through the books and things that they would tell me to read, through being able to have, I was very fortunate. I had a support network at home. I had a mentor that came in and saw me. I had visits every week. So, and I had, a plan. I was very spiritually grounded. I knew what I wanted to do. But it had nothing to do with the prison, and that's why it's very important for us to think about alternatives to incarceration and how do we reinvest that into community-based organizations that are led by and of formerly incarcerated people and directly impacted people.
Thank you.
When I was inside, I was fortunate. I just had incredible mentors who, they're currently dying in prison. They've been in prison 40, 50 years now. But one of the things that I really want to lift up is the model that ARC has. Like, seriously, and I'm not just saying that because, I'm the ED. I'm serious and very intentional about this. So we have very important in-reach programs. A lot of people do outreach. Our members, we have a members team called Hope and Redemption. The leader of that team is our director, Sam Lewis, who actually sent a prayer up. He's dealing with some things. Just sent a prayer up for Sam. These are lifers, men who literally have got out of prison after 30-something years, 20 years, 30 years. They go back in prison 4 times a week. 4 times a week to provide hope and love to men who hope to be them one day. We have a team that goes into several juveniles and spend time with them young men to make sure that they don't end up graduating to the prison system. Those models can be replicated because it's peer-to-peer. It's people who've lived through it. And the crazy thing is that people are resistant to that outside of California. And I couldn't share this information without acknowledging the founder of ARC, who's actually here, Scott Budnick, who y'all probably see running around. This organization that serves hundreds of members was sparked by him just going inside and having proximity to young men who are suffering. and he decided to do something about it, and now, nearly 5 years later, hundreds of members served later, it's working. Super low recidivism rate. 70% of people go back to prison. Less than 10% of ARC members end up back in that environment. Literally because somebody just decided to do something different. Go inside, show it a little love, show a little care, produce different outcomes. Everybody in this room is capable of doing that. You don't have to join RARC to do it, but you can do it. A little bit of love, a little bit of care, and a lot of hope goes a long way.
We've got a question right here. Stand up.
I have to underscore what you said by just mentioning that 2 summers ago, ARC did a survey of its over 250 formerly incarcerated members in which they asked what were the top 3 things you need when you come home from prison. And in that top 3 list, housing and employment were 2 and 3. But number 1, if I recall correctly, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm mistaken, but I think I'm not. Number 1 was mentors.
Absolutely.
Mentors, right? Folks who've been through what brothers and sisters inside are going through and have not forgotten about their struggle and remain committed to making sure that they give a guiding light and a pathway to freedom and liberation on the path that they're on. So I wanna acknowledge and celebrate what you just had to say as well. So thank you. So we have someone in the back who had a hand up here. Okay, up there, and then we'll come over here.
Hi, my name is Nick Tinson. I'm currently in the United States Navy and everything. I had a really quick question. I just wanted to get your opinion about how you feel about people who serve in the military, especially those of color. And my other question was with me, all my life since 2008, when I was 18, I've always been libertarian. I didn't agree with Democrats and Republicans were saying. So how do I go off with finding a party that represents what I feel?
So I'm not sure, I just want to make sure I heard the question correctly. I think it was, what do you think about the military-industrial complex, Melina? Was that the question? Something like, was that? So people of color who serve in the military, thoughts?
They probably got PTSD too.
Yeah,
that's real.
Yeah, well, that's real. That's real. I'll say this. I spent a lot of time at Rikers Island. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from New York, from the East Coast. Been out here less than 3 years. But and LA has the most folks incarcerated in any jail system in the world. But New York and Rikers Island is the largest penal colony. It's in one space, 10 jails with it was 15,000 people when I started working there and teaching the young folks there. And inside the largest high school at Rikers, because there's several, there was a big sign when you first walk into the high school that had a picture of a man who was split in half. And on the back half, he had his green prison outfit on. And the front half, he had a camouflage military outfit on, holding an M16. And over the top of it, it said, "Choose your green." As if to say, for these 16 to 19 years old, over 4 to 5,000 every year who are at Rikers, these are your options. These are your choices. Choose to be in prison, choose to go give your life, and pledge allegiance to the flag of a country that has never pledged its allegiance to you. Yeah. I say that as the son of an Army veteran who, with a medical disability, had to fight just to get the basic minimum disability he was promised, because after experiencing the trauma that he experienced in the U.S. Army, he came home and did not get the basic dignity and respect that any human being deserves, all right? Especially one who's put their life on the line, right, for something that whether or not it was going to be returned has always been questionable. So I think there's a lot of parallels for us to think about in terms of the experience of folks who are incarcerated and folks who experience the prison industrial complex and folks who experience the military industrial complex. And the last thing I'll say is this is before Eisenhower left office. One of the few things that I really recall that he had to say that was meaningful to me was that he said, beware of conflating your interest in security and safety with profit motive. Beware of allowing the interest in generating capital and profits with being mixed with the idea of national security, because ultimately that's what's happened. And we've seen it not just with the military-industrial complex, but with the prison-industrial complex, because we know that both are driven by this idea that we can generate huge profits off of the suffering and off the backs of other people, right? So I don't lay blame on folks who feel like they have few options and few choices and feel forced into these small spaces where their lives are not respected and given dignity and fundamental decency. I don't blame folks, but I also want to call for a sense of critical consciousness and thinking about those choices within the broader context of what our communities are facing. All right. Do we have a microphone back there? Okay, no, we have one. All right. Let's try to get one over here next.
Thank you very much. Listening to you guys and following the current events, I cannot stop and think about Palestine. I just came back 3 weeks ago, so everything is fresh in my mind. And listening to you guys, in Palestine, they arrest young children. They have administrative detention. Kids are tortured. You guys heard about Ahed Tamimi? Do you guys know what happened to Ahed Tamimi? Why she slapped a soldier? It's not in the news, but an Israeli soldier shot her 15-year-old cousin, almost blew his brains out. Once Ahed Tamimi found out that her 15-year-old cousin got his brains blown out, she reacted like anyone else would react, and she slapped the soldier. So the news came out that, oh, why is a Palestinian slapping an Israeli soldier? That was the news, and then she is incarcerated. Her mom recorded that slap, and because she uploaded that video in Facebook, she has been detained for that. So there's a lot of connections to the way the Palestinians are treated, to the same way that our black and brothers are treated here, and to the fact that this, your country, or this America, gave Israel $38 billion to support the Israeli apartheid. Now, if we bring in on a local level, $38 billion to Israel to continue this same type of torture, the way the city of LA puts a lot of money to the police department. And so we gotta change, or the way this country puts a lot of money in defense budget. We gotta shift our narrative from security to having criminalizing our people. Defense budget to bombing other countries. In order for us to secure and have public safety, to ensure public safety means that our children have to have a good education, our elders should have senior housing. We have to talk about the basic human rights. And that is how you have public safety on a local level. That's how you have national security on a national level. So let's shift the security aspect and make it more humane.
Okay, so I think that was more of a comment, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it, because do we have a response from any of our panelists before we go forward? Okay, we're gonna go forward. So
I have a question right here in the back.
Okay.
Yes.
Please say your name.
How you doing? I'm Marte, from a program called Repent in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Yeah, give me a clap there. There we go. I have had the unfortunate experience of going through the incarceration process. I have been in that Twin Towers, unfortunately. I did over 10 years in prison in New Jersey. I found ways to try to overcome those obstacles in getting out. And doing so, diligently striving to do so. The obstacles that I found most is with some of the program, that quote unquote nonprofit system that is really not set up for us to be able to do peer-to-peer, because they really don't recognize our value. How do we overcome these obstacles that are set up amongst us, that we're already dealing with all the other problems? But when we're trying to get out there and really help, and you got people who have monies that are intentionally blocking these avenues, how do we reach out to people like maybe that we can use that in New Jersey? It could be amazing. Maybe we can use that in New Jersey. But how can we reach out to brothers who, like yourself, who have been, sisters who are like yourselves, who have been there and know how to do it and be able to replicate that elsewhere? Because right now the struggle is serious and we need your help.
Thank you for that question. I could just talk about from my experience, and when you talk about systems and funding and how do you do replication models. So I have Hope House, which is a safe housing space for women and girls in the Bronx. And my house is a replication model of a new way of life, which is Susan Burton's housing. And we started off of a grant from Susan Burton. And so I share that because that's another formerly incarcerated woman that I had reached out to, who I heard was doing the work that I wanted to do. And after having conversation with her, she invested and poured into me, right? So that I can do what I needed to do. And that helped me get started. And once I started to move and I was able to get the house full, and through all the adversities that we have in the community, I was still able to go to different foundations because I had tangible work. And then the foundation started to fund us. So I mean, I think first, again, when we think about the network, and we gotta think about, you know, like I also, before I was incarcerated, I was an entrepreneur. And I always think about like diversifying portfolios. And that you don't always have to go after the same foundations and the same ways of funding that you see everyone else doing. It's how do you find different creative ways in order to fund the work that you do. But it also starts within building community and within your network. So yes, you can do replication models, and maybe that's something that you can talk to about with ARC, with the brothers up here, because it might be something that's working or that can work in Atlantic City. And also look for other things that are happening within your community. There's a large national movement of formerly incarcerated leaders. And so tap in. I mean, there's a few up there in Jersey, you know, so we can always connect you to. But, you know, social media has given us the ability to really connect in ways that we wouldn't have to before. So I think, you know, it's really not as difficult. And I mean, I'm just saying this based on my experience, right? I think the difficulty is that we always go after what we see other people doing and not necessarily doing our research and due diligence to see, like, hey, how can I get something done? Because you don't want to be tied into a lot of these foundations anyway, to be honest. So, I mean, we can talk afterwards.
All right, I've got another question right here.
Thank you. I think we have time for just maybe one more question. So who have we missed? Right here, please.
Hello, my name is Celeste. I'm part of Transitions Collective. Transitions Collective is a student organization at Cal State San Marcos, and we are composed of formerly incarcerated students and students who have family members who have been impacted by the criminal injustice system and allies. And my question for you is, how we just started about a year ago at the university. How can we better assist and offer our services and our help and guidance for folks who are coming out of the prison system to better reintegrate and succeed in higher education?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. So I'm back in college. I just finished my semester maybe 2 weeks ago. And I think that, you know, a lot of the times, I think with me, for example, I had to deal with the aspect of shame, of not coming out in a sense. I was like in a closet, so I was going to school and like no one knew or no one knows that I was formerly incarcerated, and that was just psychological. I don't know, it was probably a defense for me to protect myself because I didn't want to be judged. So I think, you know, your first approach, I think that it should be kind of like very sensitive. You know, every case is different. I don't think we're going to find something that's categorical, that's going to fit everyone. So I would just kind of like, you know, approach it like individually. Each person is different at a different stage in their life. Even when you come, like, for example, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to major in. And, you know, it was me just going to school and figuring that out and what truly my passion was. And, for example, having mentors. I have mentors that aren't just not only formerly incarcerated. You know, I have mentors who are attorneys, like Elizabeth Calvin, Heidi Rummel, F.D. Sharoni. Like, these are people that I go to and I ask, and I'm like, what do you think I should do? And they guide me. So, like I said, and for the brother too, it applies for him too. We're fortunate here in California that we have an organization like ARC and a lot of nonprofits who are allies with ARC and are part of this work that we do. But to affect the life, you don't need ARC. You don't need all these other allies. You can do it on your own. You can impact one life, and that's enough. You're saving a life. This is a human crisis. You're saving one life, and I think that's enough.
So I'm getting the signal that we are at time. So I want to close out by thanking our powerful guests, Shaka, Joel, Topeka, Melina. Please give them a big round of applause, right? I also want to thank Gina and Christina for all their leadership and work to pull all this together. All of the We Rise organizers, staff, the team, everybody involved doing all the work. And I want to end by sharing words that I was given by a mentor of mine, Mr. Harry Belafonte, who told me a worker's anthem that I will never forget. He says, calculate carefully and ponder it well. And remember this when you do. My two hands are mine to sell. They built your machines. They can stop them too. Thank you, peace and power. Good night.
And thank you so much to Bryonn Bain. Thank you so much. And we want to let you know that if anyone feels the need to talk to any counselors, please find someone with a We Rise t-shirts. We have counselors on site. If anyone feels the need that they need to speak to anyone. And I believe there's a petition going around, so please sign that as well. And thank you again to the amazing panel and Bryonn Bain. Thank you.